the thing is, each site is a little bit different in terms of inside the forest. But each site, the outer part of the forest, is quite similar. So what I want to say is we'll have probably 7 different sacred forest community types, which altogether will be a lot of species diversity. But there's basically one non-sacred forest community type because all the hillsides are kind of very homogeneous. You know what I mean? So there'll be like one non-sacred forest community. So maybe bird diversity and abundance within this forest versus outside will be about the same. But when you start lumping all of the sacred forest sites together, you have much more diversity because these are protecting different habitats.
Jodi, what's the one that's calling right now that just right there that had the "pleased to meet you" kind of call to it?
My trick for remembering that one is I'm a rosefinch.
That's a rosefinch.
Yeah, that's
nice.
The common rosefinch.
Very nice.
Pleased to meet you. I'm a rosefinch.
And then there's
these guys have good imagination. That's good.
that one that's the wibbity 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 wibbity.
Witchety witchety witchety.
Yeah,
that's a blithe leaf warbler.
Nice.
Point count is just stopping, and here's my field sheet, but you just write down everything that you see in here in that 10 minutes. I just come here and hike as fast as I can to get to a site and then stop and take a 10-minute point count. And then once the 10-minute point count is over, then I walk as fast as I can to the next plot and stop and take a 10-minute. Way to do it is just to record everything that you hear. Like often I'll hear a warbler, like a male warbler singing, and now I know the calls of that species too. And so I know I can detect that there's a male warbler singing and then a female of that species calling. And they'll be right together, you know, like a chick, 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 doodaloo, doodaloo, doodaloo. And I know they're the same species, so I just write down everything that there is. But often only the male is singing. You know there's probably a female in there, but they're not saying anything. So different people do it differently. Like there's this little circle I use to kind of place. I'm in the middle of the circle. And so I put, I hear a rosefinch here and I hear a laughing thrush there. Oh. And then I kind of try to figure out where everything is, and so I don't overcount or undercount. I try to estimate the distance it is away from me, because there are formulas. The birds that are closer to you, you have more of a chance of detecting. The birds that are 40 meters away from you, you have less of a chance of detecting. So there's programs that you do afterwards. I record how far away I think the bird is from me, and then you put this data into a program actually, and then it calculates a different measure of abundance depending on how far away the birds were. Vertical structure of a forest. Birds really respond to a forest that has many different vertical layers. So we do a special measurement where you take a pole that's measured and you count how many times vegetation hits that pole. And you do this like at 16 times in each plot. And in this way you kind of have a quantitative measure of how much foliage and at what heights they are at each of your sites. So this is something that a botanist really wouldn't do, you know, but this is something that in a bird study that's really important. And if you look at the warbler pages in the field guide, it's really, really hard. Yeah. This was the hard, a lot of the species we could learn pretty quickly, but the warblers all look the same. Thankfully they sound the same, but even Han, the professor from Southwest Forestry, he didn't know all the warbler songs. So me and Merlin, my field guide, basically had to just be out in the field every day. And you hear something for a while and it becomes familiar, like, oh, that's the witchety witchety, but you don't know what species it is until someday you get a really good look at it, and then you can key it out in your field guide, and then forever after you know that the witchety witchety is that warbler. But it took all these weeks in the field. My proposal, it's only one field season, and I think they let me get away with that because nobody really thought it would all happen. But now that all the birds are learned and the plots are selected, if I could get a couple thousand more dollars, I think I could come back and really easily get a second year of data, which in these types of studies is really important. But their Chinese is really bad too. So, you know, in this way you get along. You communicate, and it works out. Yeah. Sometimes just exploring around and looking. Like, what I like to think is I couldn't really ask questions, so everything that I was learning was just very visual. And of course it's better to ask questions, but if all your senses are just focused like on observing and learning that way, you learn a lot that way. I think that there could be a lot of interesting things about what are the meaning of these and how do they decide what is the boundaries and what's allowed and what's not allowed. But it's like a whole another research project.
Exactly.
And I know in Hamagu, one of my sites, I did go there with a guide, and he had said that their sacred forest used to be much better, but during the Cultural Revolution, there was a lot of cutting and destruction that happened. And now it's quite small, and you can tell there had been a lot of disturbance there. So definitely, these things change over time. And I think interviews with the villagers would be really, I think it'd be really neat to have interviews about the meaning of these and then with the vegetation and the bird data to kind of have an interdisciplinary paper about what do these mean to the people and what do they mean to the birds. I think the idea for my research is that these places I'm studying are small, but there are big sacred places on the landscape as a whole. Meili Shuashan, Baima Shuashan, Da Shuashan. And, you know, maybe if we can study these and learn something from these, we can extrapolate to the larger landscape, like what these mean to people and what they mean to landscape scale.
Hey, Jodi?
Yeah.
What is that?
That's the Chinese bay bat.
Nice.
I haven't even ever seen it once. It must be really shy, but it has really distinct